Welcome. Welcome to our session today on generative AI. Today we will be inspired by the fascinating world of artificial intelligence and will hear about 3 fascinating business applications here from our ecosystem. Generative AI is a subset of artificial intelligence, and it's not limited to just processing and analyzing data, but it can actually create data on its own. Content like text, music, videos. And with the rise of tools like DALL-E or ChatGPT end of last year, AI is suddenly usable and helpful for basically all of us. And this is also the moment when use started to dominate our social feed. Microsoft invests $10 billion in OpenAI. Just last week, GPT-4, the language model standing behind ChatGPT, was launched, and it allows us now to also add images to the conversation with the bot. There are loads of recommendations and overviews of tools we can use to make our life much more efficient, much easier. But of course, there are also challenges. Biased data, biased models, content containing sexism, racism, or as we saw also last week, biased voting recommendations, legal challenges. Today, we want to go beyond what you've already heard and seen at your feet. We want to show you 3 applications from companies here from our ecosystem at the high-tech campus and how they use generative AI for their business. I'm Marina from the high-tech campus team, and together with Paul and some more colleagues, we run the AI Innovation Center here just next door at HTC 5 here at the campus. So, Paul, you've initiated the AI Innovation Center. Keep yourself busy quite a lot with AI, I would say.
Not only myself, I think.
So, why do we need an event like this? What is so important about the recent developments?
Yeah, so maybe it's good to start to give people some context of the AI Innovation Center, because I can imagine that a lot of people haven't heard of us so far. So the AI Innovation Center is an initiative of the high-tech campus, and we started it 2 years ago with the mission to industrialize AI in this region, which is quite a big mission, of course. And over the last 2 years, we've been programming a lot of events, building a big community around applied AI specifically. And today, what we do is we organize all kinds of events, knowledge sharing, and we really want to build the applied AI ecosystem in this region, because companies indicate that this technology is going to be really, really important for them in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's basically the why of the AI Innovation Center. And as Marina mentioned, we are located in HT5 right next door. And why this event? I think what we try to do is really set the agenda for this region, making people able to start experimenting with AI. And as you have all seen in recent months, generative AI is really creating momentum for AI and making it accessible to basically everyone. And that's the interesting thing on generative AI. And today we want to go, as Marina mentioned, beyond the buzz, beyond the hype, and look at concrete use cases that companies are already exploring. So we're going to look into customer experience, we're going to look into how generative AI is going to speed up software development, and we're going to look at product design and product development, all with companies from our network, let's say. So as mentioned, we are located in HG5, so this initiative from the high-tech campus, and we're running there basically a lot of events, education. We're building the ecosystem together with a lot of partners, a growing network of partners to bring the right content to the industry here in the Brainport-Eindhoven region. And this all has to lead to our goal, and that's new projects, new applications, companies applying AI in the real world, in their businesses, in their processes, and that's what we are going to. So if you want to visit us, we're an open center, so please be welcome to visit us on the ground floor in HT5. And there you find 14 residents, of which some of them are demoing today in the hall. But also Resleeve, one of the startups in the center, is doing a presentation today about generative AI for product design. So we have a growing number of AI companies, mainly data science and AI consulting firms, or AI companies or startups with AI in the core of their products and services. So these are the main groups of companies we have located there on this floor. And then of course we also have a lot of partners. We're building the partner ecosystem also to attract partners from outside the region, because we have to pull in all the knowledge that we can in order to grow this ecosystem and raise the level of knowledge and understanding of AI in general. So that is a brief introduction. If you want to know more, take a look at our website or drop us a line at social media or via this email address here. I'm excited actually for this event, because I think generative AI is going to bring AI really into everyone's life. The recent announcements also by Microsoft last week, the co-pilot features, probably a lot of you have seen this, is going to revolutionize, I think, the way we work in our daily lives in the office. I was already looking, and maybe we can ask the Microsoft guys later on stage, when is this available to everyone? Because it's going to make your life easier as a professional, even if you're not really in innovation, but just in a regular office job, let's say. So that, to me personally, is really an interesting thing. And I think we want to close off this part and get started with the rest of the program by asking you one question. And Marina, I think you are going to introduce this, but people can go to menti.com, so please take out your phone. It's really valuable to us if we have this kind of information. Also, to keep in mind, we use this information for future events, to define the right programs, bring you the right content. So it would be really nice if you could ask this single question. Go to menti.com and put in the code right here in the screen. And then I think we're going to see what's on your mind.
Yeah, so don't be afraid, it's just one question. Not too much to answer. Okay, I think we can start the question. So our question, how do you think generative AI is going to impact your business? So efficiency, of course, is one of the main hopes.
People are asking, is that a German flag?
Yeah.
It's about the colors in the...
Again.
Suspicious, yeah. Right?
So communication, I see, productivity and efficiency, so making our lives easier.
Creativity as well, also obviously an interesting thing, and I think Rogier will definitely come back to this topic in his presentation.
Yeah, especially also having more time for creativity as a human.
Yeah.
Disruptive. Yeah, thank you for your input. And I think now it's time to start and dive into the first application field, customer service. Heath Ramsey from ServiceNow, he came all his way from the US to present us how ServiceNow uses generative AI to improve their customer conversation. And he will also share his vision on what customer experience will look like in the future. So please welcome Ramsey with a big applause.
Dank u wel. Ik heet Heath Ramsey. Ik kom uit de Verenigde Staten. Veel plezier om allemaal jullie te ontmoeten. That's about all the Dutch you're going to hear from me this afternoon. So, my name is Heath Ramsey. I come out of the United States. I am very happy to be here. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you. My topic for today is talking about generative AI and the customer experience. I come from a company called ServiceNow. We are a platform company. We do workflow automation, and we actually do it really well. We're one of the leading platform workflow engine providers in the world. But generative AI is going to have a massive impact on everything that we do, and most importantly, it's going to have a massive impact on everything that our customers do as well. So what I'm going to be covering today is a little bit about the customer problem, how we frame it in terms of workflow, how we frame it in terms of efficiency and productivity and automation, all those different things that we just saw in that one question. And then we'll talk a little bit about generative AI and what it means, followed by some of the things that we're working on here at ServiceNow in order to really affect and make sure that digital transformation is easy and that it responds to all the things around generative AI. So a little bit about me first, because I know everybody is dying to know that, but we have to have the obligatory slide here. I've been in the industry, the IT industry, for I don't want to say how many years at this point, but clearly all the gray hairs that I have here are a testament to everything that we've been through. Now, for me, having been in the industry for over 25 years, generative AI to me is probably the biggest transformational event in enterprise software, probably of my entire career. And so this has a really massive impact on how we have to be thinking about product, how we have to be thinking about experiences, and how we have to think about how our customers are going to be using this technology. Oh, my dream really is to go to the nun school. Because when I put this in, this is how I learned Dutch. It may or may not be right, but when I put it into Google Translate, it said, "Naar de school gaan om Nederlands te leren." And I'm like, I just want to know the difference. Like, why are we using a gerund there instead of just using a straight verb? Anyway, I'm wasting time on that. So, framing the customer problem. The way that we think about work at ServiceNow, and the way I think that most people think about work as well, is that we have a group of people that are trying to get things done, all within organizations, and independent of how many people you have working on a problem, there's probably 5 or 6 different personas that everybody sort of boils down into, right? You're either an end user that needs something from an organization, and this could be an external entity. It could be a partner, it could be a customer, it could be anything. We have workers, the people who actually get stuff done. Workers are clearly important because they make everything go. Service owners, the people that are responsible for the digital transformation, making sure these things are available digitally. We have builders, we have admins. People, as I mentioned, are generally going to fall in one of those 5 categories. But each of these folks, as we go through the digital transformation process, need to be working in concert and working together. Because if you have a group of people that are just working over in a silo in a vacuum and not communicating, you get this thing that we call email and phone calls and escalations and all those different kinds of things. So putting them into a straight platform, one that does workflow automation, really allows organizations to be able to digitally transform. And this is the heart of the problem. So when we get these groups together and we make it a team sport, as I mentioned in that last slide, that's an ugly process. This isn't uncommon. How many people recognize themselves or their organizations in this kind of workflow? Anybody? Yeah, sheepishly raising our hands. How do we react? We react to this by organizing our organizations in different ways. We have different tiers. I have a group of people who answer the first set of problems. If I can't answer it, I go to the second tier, I go to the third tier, et cetera, et cetera. And we do this because we have really high-valued thought workers up at the top that we don't want working on day-to-day kind of stuff. They should only have to be involved when they only have the knowledge to be able to solve the problem. We see this in IT, we see this in HR, we see this in customer service, we see this all across the board. The key is making sure that we can, what they call shift left and shift down. Has anybody heard of this concept before? Wow, only a few hands. I feel like I've been trying to do this for 25 years in the industry. It may have been given a nice name now called shift left and shift down, but shifting left means that I give the people at the front line the tools and the capability and the knowledge to do what they need to do to be able to solve all these problems. I don't want to escalate it. Shift down means that I'm giving the end user self-service. Think about it. I'm a customer of a bank. I'm a customer of Disney. I'm a customer of whomever. As a user, I don't necessarily want to have to talk to a human. I just want to be able to get what I need, whether that's a new subscription to Disney Plus, whether that is a change in my flight from an airline, whatever that happens to be. I'm happier as a customer. If we do this right, we get increased customer satisfaction, we get reduced cost, and we get improved efficiency. So all those different things that you talked about up here and how you answered that question, although I can't answer, is that a German flag with shift left and shift down, as much as I might like to. But this is what you get. There is workflow on the back end that is ultimately going to make this a possibility. As ServiceNow, this is effectively what we do. The center of everything is the platform. It is a workflow engine, and that workflow engine has all kinds of capabilities like integration, being able to connect with other systems, like workflow and logic, like intelligence. We've been working in AI and ML for a number of years at this point, enriching it and making it an intelligent low-code platform. And on top of that, you can pretty much build any solution. We have out-of-the-box solutions for manufacturing and a various set of industries, in addition to IT and customer service and HR and everything else. But you can build anything that you want to because you have a workflow engine right there. That's great. Structured processes. It's the red meat and lifeblood of organizations. What is generative AI? Well, generative AI is this massive unstructured data out there that we're all trying to figure out how to harness and make better, and in an enterprise business perspective, bringing order from all of this chaos. So generative AI is really important, and all of our customers that I'm talking to are really curious about what it means and how it's going to affect their business. I am too, because we're seeing this as this entire wave coming in, and we need to respond to it as quickly as we possibly can. For me, and there's lots of smarter people in this room, so please don't beat me up too badly. There's three main components of generative AI. There's your intake or your prompt. By the way, prompting is going to be the new sweet coding language, right? Figuring out how to prompt the machine to do something. But it's your intake. That's how you actually get the machine to do something. Comprehension is the big thing that everybody's talking about right now. ChatGPT and all the large language models are the things that are taking these intakes, figuring out the intents, figure out all the different pieces, and then we get the response. For me, I'm saying a lot of for me because this is really kind of a personal kind of thing, the response has been very interesting. I've been on ChatGPT. I've been on Microsoft's solution. I've typed some things in and gone, that answer is not correct. Fortunately, I know that answer is not correct. But we have to figure out what that means in the future and in the long run. And I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But these three things, when we figure it out, are supposed to give us automation, acceleration, augmentation. This is the key. This is the promise. As I was putting this slide together, that green line in the middle was really just a separation for my animation to create two sides of the slide. But in reality, it actually is digitally representative of the wall between what generative AI does today versus what the outcomes might be. All the responses that I've seen, some of them are really productive, but it's summarization of information. It's I'm going to draft an email for you. I'm going to do something that gives you a text response. But in the future, we need that response to turn into real action. It can't just be a text. It has to figure out what's going on with the process. It has to be able to fix it. And that's going to be the key. And that's what we're working on here at ServiceNow, because through workflow in the business setting, this is what's going to bridge us from the concept of generative AI and its three components over to the promised business outcomes. And that's critical. Imagine a world where you are typing in your prompt and all of a sudden you've reconfigured a process. Imagine a world where you've typed in your prompt and all of a sudden you have something sitting at your doorstep. We kind of do that today, but we don't do it in natural language. But the workflow has to be there, and businesses have to be able to respond and adapt in that way. So some blockers. What are we up against here? First is cost. As organizations are trying to figure out what this means to them, there is a tangible cost. Does anybody know what the projected cost of ChatGPT-4 is per transaction right now? I've heard, and since I heard it on the internet, it must be true, $2.50 a transaction. So imagine, and this is the latest technology, and this is what's going to continue to happen. We'll innovate, new things will be released, they'll be expensive. But imagine that I'm a user at a company, and my company is using ChatGPT-4, and I have a running conversation that takes 100 transactions. It's a pretty expensive conversation. Even today, with the earlier models, we're talking about potentially a few cents per transaction. So you have to balance a model and figure out, what does this mean for me in terms of my transformation, and how am I going to afford to use it? Is it important for me as a company to be able to do this? I mean, we think the answer is yes, but we have to figure it out. Data concerns. Is anybody here concerned about the data going into ChatGPT and what's being done with it? No? Raise the hands? Yes? Okay. There we go. No, I am too. And as business people, people who are providing services, we have to make sure that customers' data are protected. Now look, I'm not saying that ChatGPT doesn't have responsibility and governance and all those other things. It does. But we all should be giving this a front seat in terms of how we're thinking about generative AI. And then the last one is reputation. Skull's there for a reason. Imagine, I'm gonna use a random company. Imagine that I'm Disney, I used them before, and I have a customer on Disney Plus, and they're trying to modify their subscription. Imagine that through the generative AI chatbot, the prompt, we're starting to see some of this split personality stuff like we've been hearing about in the industry. It's responding in weird ways, it's saying things that it shouldn't be saying, it's falling in love with the user, that kind of thing. This isn't good for Disney's brand. This isn't good for the brand of the company that happens to be providing those services for Disney. So there is an aspect of brand reputation here that also needs to be considered when thinking about generative AI. It's not just the business that has to adopt this, right? How many of you, right now, by a show of hands, would be comfortable just adopting generative AI in a professional business setting? Got one brave soul up at the top, 2, 3. Okay, so there's a fair level of skepticism here amongst this group about what this potentially means and how you would personally use it. And I think that's absolutely amazing. And I think that's something that we need to continue to embrace, because ultimately that feedback is what's going to make it better and allow us to ultimately bridge that hump and get people to adopt. But just putting yourself in the shoes of somebody that has to consume the service that you're providing in a business setting, trust. I talked before about the fact that I got an answer, I don't trust it. It's not right. I know it's not right. And that's the poor response quality as well. I just got a puppy a couple weeks ago. And as you bring a puppy into the family, there's a healthy debate, sometimes an unhealthy debate over the name. The name that was chosen at first, Branford. You're like, who's Branford? Branford Marsalis, after a jazz musician. Okay, that name was not popular amongst the family. So thinking about different iterations, trying to reach a compromise like we normally do, putting in search terms and everything else, I asked, what is Branford Marsalis' nickname? Came up with a list of nicknames. Yeah, they weren't Branford Marsalis' nicknames. They were his dad's nicknames in the jazz industry. That was awesome. But as I got more specific with what I was looking for, the less I was able to get in terms of value for me. We need to consider that as we're building these models, as we're building these solutions for our customers. And then the last piece is what I call swivel chair. If I am a user, I don't want to have to be in one tab of a browser and get a response, and then have to go shift to another tab in the browser to be able to use what I just learned over there. It needs to be a completely integrated experience. Because if it's not, what's going to happen? I'm going to get bored with it. I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to go back to what I do. Has anybody heard of an acronym? This is very English, so I apologize. Wiki will. You've heard of WYSIWYG, right? Wiki will. What I know is what I like. It's inertia. People are not going to use things that are different unless it's integrated into their experiences. So I appreciate you letting me pontificate for a little bit about what generative AI is. Let's talk a little bit about how generative AI can be used in the context of digital transformation, that team sport that I talked about. I want you to be thinking about those processes, and I want you to be thinking about those blockers and those components, because this is about how we're going to appeal to each one of these individual personas in order to make sure that they're having the best experience possible. The end user, the customer, your partner, whoever it happens to be, whoever is consuming your service, immediately the things that you're going to see, not just from ServiceNow, but from everybody, is the virtual agent or chatbot. You're going to see enhanced search experiences, because right now, generative AI is designed for these kinds of solutions. It's a very, very natural fit, and everybody's excited about it. There is a whole set of future experiences that are out there. Paul talked about Microsoft a little bit earlier. I was blown away when I saw Copilot. Oh my gosh. Like, that is a reimagining of everything. We're going to continue to see those kinds of things, and it's going to affect the end user. But what you can expect, especially in the manufacturing area of the world, are things like seamless purchasing and returns, part and manual discovery, and no agent needed fulfillment. Think about how easy it would be if you could provide a service based upon all of this technology that would allow people to just, a few sentences, get whatever it is that they wanted or needed from your company or organization. That is great customer experience. That is great efficiency and productivity for your organization. So be thinking for the end user about the shift down. It's all about the self-service. The worker, the people who are on the floor, what do they get? Well, hopefully they're getting experience that makes their working life easier. That's really what this is all about as well. So how do I shift left with these people? Make sure that we can get the question answered as quickly as possible and not have to involve everybody within the organization. So search engine, again, that makes perfect sense because I should be able to find the answers, but automated recommendations. If I come in and I'm faced with a certain situation, there should be an answer for me, at least a proposed answer that I can work from, rather than me trying to figure everything out. And then the last issue is summarization and publication. So if I have done something and I've solved the question, how do I make sure that's just not in my brain and my brain alone? How many people here love writing standard operating procedure manuals? Not my favorite thing to do. Another great example for generative AI and the application of this technology. So being able to provide enhanced exceptions handling, consistent SOP consumption and enforcement, making sure that everybody's doing everything the same way each time to drive the efficiency of the manufacturing line. And of course, that knowledge standardization that I was talking about just a minute ago. Service owners, these are the folks that actually need to put a manufacturing line into production, provide a service, etc. So driving business outcomes, making sure that we are transforming, especially in today's economic headwinds. How do I get to be more efficient? How do I get to be more productive? Well, the solutions that we're working on and many other organizations are working on are what you see here. Imagine a business process where I just put the text in, say I want a process to do X, Y, and Z with these parameters, and all of a sudden I really have a workflow process that does that. We call that text to workflow, and that's something that we're going to be showing in the very near future. Similar service discovery. For those of you who deal with large complex organizations, everybody has their own invoice process. Hopefully not, but you know that there's exceptions. Everybody has their own receiving process. Everybody has their own way of wanting to do things. Well, what if as I'm building an application or building a service, generative AI makes a recommendation to me, say, hey, do you know that this department over here does what you're looking to do this way? Why don't you just copy it? Or better yet, why don't you just use it? Those are the kinds of things that generative AI can and should be used for, because that way you get better code use, better consistency, better quality in the services that you're providing. And then, of course, process optimization. Hey, did you know that you've got a bottleneck in this process right here? Not only can I make a recommendation about what you should do, click a button, I'll make it happen. So automating supply chains, consistent creation, proactively fixing supply chains, all of those things are clearly in the realm of possibility for the service owner. The builder, developer, people creating applications. Text to code, code validation. Same thing as text to flow, but going a little bit deeper, being able to provide that to the developer. Same thing with similar code and function discovery. But in a future world, imagine if I typed a paragraph about what I wanted the application to be, and the application just was. How many people think that's cool? Okay, trying to go for the audience interaction here. Come on, work with me. But that's all it will happen. New services, reusing IP, allowing everybody to digitally transform. There is a school of thought that everybody's going to become a builder. I get scared at the thought of that, but it's probably true. And that's what we want. The only way for us to truly get to a place where we're able to transform and adapt as quickly as we need to is if we have everybody given the power to be able to do this. And generative AI is going to level the playing field. It absolutely is, and we're going to be providing that to customers. And then on the admin side, it is about making sure that you have a solid platform, monitoring instances, being proactive with your maintenance, continuously updating the learnings, and most importantly, that last one, a generative AI watchtower. That's governance. Organizations need to know what the machine is doing, because in the absence of anybody monitoring the machine, you all saw Terminator and Skynet, right? That may still be a fantasy. I hope it's a fantasy. But the reality is we need these governance mechanisms in place. We need the ethical application of data. We need the ethical application of policies, especially as it relates to AI. So admins are very much going to be in this game of trying to figure out how they do that. And this is a true impact to your customer as well. So in summarization, when I think about generative AI in the context of the customer experience, it's not just the end customer. Everybody in that chain participates in the service, whether it's the building of the service, whether it is the application of the service, whether it is working the service, consuming the service. And for us to properly use generative AI and use it most efficiently, we have to make sure that we're appealing to all those personas and that we overcome the obstacles for organizations being able to adopt it. Right now, we're at this precipice of generative AI is amazing. How are we going to build something that uses it? We're clearly at the tipping point where all of the different technologies are coming together to a point where it looks like this is really going to revolutionize things. The barrier is going to be how well are people going to relate to it, how well people are going to adjust to it, and remember, it's the workflow. At the heart of everything related to the customer experience, it is the workflow. That is the future with generative AI. So with that, I will be happy to open it up to Q&A.
Thank you, Ramsey. So we will now have time for Q&A. So we have this nice little orange box. So whoever has a question can raise their hand, and Janneke will do her best to get it to you.
Wow. Okay.
Does this work? Hello, hello.
That's like A+ right there. Yes, sir.
So the generative AI's answers will never be 100% correct, right? And we have engineered workflows that mostly are. So how do you think this is going to play in the future, adopting this uncertainty?
So Excellent question. And this goes back to that whole idea of structured versus unstructured and generative AI bring everything into the mix. In reality, I think the answer is augmentation, which is the machine is likely to make recommendations, but we need a human in the loop that is actually going to click the, yes, I want to do this, or no, you need to do something different and give me a different kind of answer. We may get to a day where we trust the machine enough that we would just let it do it, but we're pretty far off from that. So human in the loop is clearly the most important thing. And building the experience that gives the human the feeling that they're in control of that machine, I think is going to be important as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, I see.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Whoa, you guys are good.
Yes. You said you were scared by the idea of everybody becoming a builder, but at the same time, you said, I want to shift down.
Yep.
Do you think that, like, in my experience, most people are still using Excel purely as a sheet without functions and like using less than 0.01% of what Excel can do. Can they bridge that gap? Can people bridge that gap? Because you just said we need a human in the loop.
Yep. So part of this answer is based upon our fundamental view of human nature, and I probably will not get into that discussion unless I have a lot of beer. But generally speaking, I think one of the things that generative AI can do is potentially unlock, so let's use Excel as that example. Generative AI is potentially going to unlock the other 50, 60, 70% of the capabilities and provide the information to the user to be able to do something with it. And so we get an enhanced experience with that. And I really think that that's what the new builder is going to be, is that he or she is going to have that kind of guidance and capability in order to be able to overcome any knowledge limitations that he or she might have with respect to the tool or respect to the process overall. So that's where I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to see people truly participate in that. I did say, I'm scared that everybody's a builder a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because we still need all those guardrails and everything in place. But if we have generative AI in the right way, that allows us to make sure that the code is consistent, that it's quality, that it's efficient, it does all those things, it doesn't blow up infrastructures because it was written poorly, then we're going to be in the place where we need to be. Does that make sense?
Yep. You decide.
Yes, thank you. In the beginning of your talk, you mentioned a little bit about some biases that are ingrained into generative AI models. How are we going to overcome that problem?
Okay, yeah. I'm going to be completely honest and say I don't know.
Yeah.
But there needs to be a lot of work put into removing biases from generative AI. It is something that we as humans and as a society need to make sure is baked into that. And every person involved in generative AI, every software vendor involved in generative AI, I believe needs to have groups that are responsible for trying their best to remove those biases. We're seeing it today. I'm going to make a broad blanket statement, and for this I apologize. The fact that ChatGPT was trained on Reddit is a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So it's about the training models and everything else. So it's something that we need to work on. I don't know that there's really a good answer at this point. I know that there are lots of groups that are figuring out how to lock it down and figuring out if you don't train it on certain pieces, then you can avoid some of the other bias, but that's where we are right now.
There are design choices, designing the artificial intelligence. So it starts with what data you put in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
You can also do a step in between. Okay. So maybe back again. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you. So during your talk, you also mentioned about the security concerns. So we give information to AI and we lose information. So I'm wondering in the future, so we will just rely on the big tech companies to provide AI service for us, or companies should also build their own generative AI agent?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question and one that doesn't have a clean answer. And what I mean by that is it's likely cost prohibitive for most companies to build a large language model like OpenAI has right now. So in a lot of respects, many organizations are going to need to outsource to that kind of third party if they need an application that is completely broad and needs the knowledge of the internet. Now, if you have an application of knowledge that is much smaller, domain specific, then you might be able to build your own language model that could take that place and provide enough of an experience and enough of a service to be able to do this digital transformation that I'm talking about. So it's really going to come down to a case-by-case basis of the risk of you getting your data off platform or out of the organization versus the service that you're providing. And I think there's going to be some business decisions that need to be made in order to be able to figure out what the trade-offs are there. Yep.
Thank you.
We're done.
So one last question from my side.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the beginning you have several years of experience. How do you look back to the changes, the impact the launch of the new tools like ChatGPT had? How much does it change about your work?
I don't think that I can properly quantify the change that it's had in the past 4 months. And that's not because we weren't thinking about AI before, it's just the speed at which this has taken hold into the public consciousness that we have to rethink how it's now AI first. It used to be AI with, but now it's AI first, and it's going to continue to be AI first as this continues to accelerate. So lots of work to do. Thank you so much for the time. It was great chatting with all of you, and looking forward to maybe some of the questions out in the networking session.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Randy. Now we make the switch to a more technical application, like questions, how can software developers be supported by generative AI? And how does it change the way a programmer works? Maurice and Hiram from Microsoft will explain in detail how Microsoft makes use of open AI services in their cloud computing platform Azure. They will explain how this increases also the productivity of a programmer. So welcome on stage, and welcome Maurice with a big applause. Thank you.
Je moet nog inloggen. Ah, dat is mijn laptop. Ja? Kan, straks. Right, okay. So, we heard there's already a lot of announcements and developments in AI, so it's a booming field. And today we want to address the role of generative AI in software development. So we will talk a bit about Azure OpenAI, what some of its features are, what models are behind it, and how you can use it to improve your or speed up your software development lifecycle. My name is Maurice. I'm joined here with Hisham. We are cloud solution architects specializing in the data and AI space, and we do this here at Microsoft in the Netherlands. So let me first position where we see generative AI. So already back in the 1950s, artificial intelligence was coming up. Its main focus then was on symbolic AI, so research was focusing in that area mainly for knowledge representation in problem solving. Then in the 1990s, with the advent of machine learning, it became better feasible actually to process large volumes of data, which greatly enhanced machine learning models. More recently, we saw deep learning entering the stage, which it's a technique modeled after the human brain and using many layers of neural networks. And Microsoft was actually the first to achieve human parity in object detection using our ResNet architecture for convolutional neural networks. And then there's generative AI. So basically what sets the other three apart is that they're discriminative in the sense that you can classify or identify or detect things in your data. But generative AI, on the other hand, it learns from all of those examples, and it can generate new content out of that, such as text or images. So now, as I said, there's been a lot of announcements. We saw some in the news articles as well. Pretty much probably all of you have already had a spin at GPT-3 with ChatGPT. You can ask it questions like, why is the sky blue, and get an answer like this. It is a large language model. Last week, March 14th, OpenAI published GPT-4, which is actually multimodal. So it means you can also feed it images as input. So it differs significantly from GPT-3 in that sense. And on top of that, I urge you to read the paper that they released on the OpenAI website, which includes a lot of examples how they trained GPT-4 additional on top of what GPT-3 already did. For instance, you can see how it passes the AP calculus test, which is kind of interesting to see. So where does Microsoft come in? So in 2019, Microsoft started a partnership with OpenAI, and we basically facilitated the infrastructure to run the models on. So we built an AI supercomputer on top of Azure infrastructure, and OpenAI could train all of their models on that AI supercomputer exclusively, which sort of led to the families of models that we see. So we have a few categories here. GPT-3 is what pretty much all of you know already. It's a code completion model. So it takes text as an input and it understands that. Codex is actually a descendant of GPT-3, but this was trained on language and also source code. DAL-E, which became famous on television as well, takes certain input prompts in the form of text and generates images out of it. And ChatGPT is also a variant of GPT-3, but it's more in conversational AI style, so for dialogue systems. And ChatGPT actually was also released into Azure OpenAI beginning of this month. So some examples of this. As I mentioned, GPT-3, which is a text completion model, it takes text as an input and it understands it and it generates text as an output. Codex, on the other hand, could, for instance, accept a prompt that gives in natural language a certain description that you want to run a query against the database, and it will create the select statement for you. DAL-E will generate an image on top of, or based on a text input. And ChatGPT has a difference as opposed to GPT-3, that since it's a conversational style, the next question you ask it can build on top of the answer that you already got. So yeah, in that sense it's different. Now, and I think in the previous talk we already addressed some of these points as well. How does Azure OpenAI differ from the OpenAI out there? So actually, I've spoken to some companies already who have blocked the ChatGPT on their firewall, on the internal network, because they might have some security risks that they see, or that maybe people start working with company secret data and ask ChatGPT what to do with it. But Azure OpenAI service is different, because Azure, as you can expect from any Azure service, this runs with enterprise-grade security. So it comes with role-based access controls. It comes with private virtual network support. It runs in your own subscription. And you can actually, the locality also plays a role. So you can run Azure OpenAI in the Western Europe data center, which is here in Amsterdam. And on top of that, you can fine-tune the models that have already been published by OpenAI. Now, a lot of questions, and I will answer them directly already for you. What happens if you fine-tune one of the OpenAI models with your own person or your own company test data and validation data? Will the model learn from that? Will my competition then gain that same insight? No, this cannot be, because you run it within your own subscription. So the models themselves, the OpenAI models, are trained completely open on the internet. But if you run it in Azure OpenAI, it will be within the boundaries of your own environment. And on top of that as well, So we recently discussed as well what are some of the harmful impacts. It comes with a set of content filters to make sure that the use cases that you provide are actually valid use cases and not harmful use. So, something about the families of models. So, there's a few, actually a lot of people don't see this, what's going on behind what's all of these OpenAI models, but there are a few variations of the models, and they build on top of each other. So DaVinci, and actually, I think I had this here. Yeah, the DaVinci is the model that's used for ChatGPT. It's the most capable of all. But since they build on top of each other, so DaVinci can do everything the other models can do as well. But it might be, in certain cases, interesting to use a model with maybe some lesser capability, but they perform faster and they can be cheaper in execution as well. So one of the things you can do in Azure OpenAI in the studio, you can play around with each of the models. You probably start with the most capable ones, such as DaVinci, then try out your use case, and then you go down one level and see if the other models also could fit your use case or not, or if the results differ in that sense. And we will later on show a few of these examples. So, focusing a bit more on the Codex model. So, since we're talking software development here, what could be potential things, what they would be used for? One of the key things, for instance, is to make APIs more accessible, in the sense, if you're coding and you need to make an API call from within your code and you don't know the exact parameters and you need to go out to the internet to search it, to find the right documentation, this could all be integrated in your development workflow. It can accelerate your software development in that sense. But also it can help you learn a programming language or learn new concepts within a programming language. So, the Codex models are derived from GPT. Currently within Azure OpenAI, they're derived from GPT 3.5. Later on, they will be from GPT 4, so that normally follows the cycle. And they're trained both on natural language and on a lot of publicly available code. And all of, in terms of programming languages, all of the usual suspects from Python, C#, SQL to anything, including actually Unix shell scripting are included. I think Python is the most present one, so there you'll get best results. And how would you use a Codex model then? So there's multiple tasks possible. The most famous one is probably an example you have already seen in GitHub Copilot example, is if you feed your program with a specific prompt in a comment, it can generate code out of that for you. Based on the context where you are in your development lifecycle, it can also autocomplete functions that you're working on, or the next line based on what you're typing. As I mentioned, for APIs, it can look up all of the parameters and details for the API, but also documenting code. So going through large volumes of code, seeing all of the comments and see what it can get out of that. So yeah, some of the use cases discussed, but what we see in the beginning the most is going from natural language to code. So you give it a few lines of human language and you ask it to generate code on top of that. Currently what we see a lot is also the other way around, from going from code to natural language. And even refactoring code or code translation. If you have a department that is running or developing everything in Java, and there's maybe an analytics department that's developing everything in Python, then there's possibilities to translate those codes and bring them better together, so to speak. So this is an example how this works. We will go into more details in a live demo, but basically, based on the context where it is in the code you're typing, here you see a prompt in the comment, and based on if you like it or not, you can include that in your code, or you can ask it for variations. We will see that in more detail. So the most famous implementation of the Codex models currently is GitHub Copilot. So let's dive into that also a bit. It's also called AI paired programming now. So you're paired with an AI assistant, the Copilot. This could really help you increase your productivity. We saw this also on the Mentimeter. That's at least some of the expectations many people have. Because basically, it saves you a lot of time looking up details on the internet. It actually does that for you already, and it just brings that to you in the context where you're working. But at the same time, it could also help you learn a new programming language or learn new concepts in the same programming language you're already familiar with. So it could bridge skill gaps there. So the process is as follows. You are in your typical IDE. This could be Visual Studio Code. This could be pretty much any of the IDEs of your choice. And based on where you are, you give it a prompt. The prompt will go to GitHub Copilot, which will actually use the Codex model. It will give a suggestion to you. That suggestion will be sort of printed in your editor. And then you can either include it in your code or you can discard it and say, I need another recommendation for that. And in that sense, it can help you develop your code. But it's not just programming language that we're talking here. So actually one of the questions was on how much functionality of Excel is being used. The Codex models can actually also, they have been trained on DAX, which is the Data Analytics Expression Language for Power BI and Excel. And based on natural language input, it can also generate DAX expressions, which you can include in Excel or Power BI, greatly enhancing more for business users rather than just programmers. Same is true for Power Platform. If you use Power Functions, it's able to generate a lot of functionality based for Power Functions on top of a natural language input. The way it normally works with Azure OpenAI is you first create a resource in your Azure subscription, which is needed for OpenAI. You need to actually apply for it still. We have many processes in place now to speed up the approval process. But once you have that available in Azure, you can run the Azure OpenAI Studio, and the Studio will give you access to your OpenAI service. So from that point on, you can run GPT within your Azure subscription. So it's not going out the open internet anymore. It's going directly in your subscription with your user credentials, with your security parameters set up. And from there, you can select many use cases. For instance, there's a playground where you can all the models I just showed you. You can try them out. You can see what model performs best. How can I use my use case there? But it's also the way to, for instance, fine-tune your model and see what parameters you can use. You can use data in your Azure subscription, for instance, in a blob store, and then feed that as test data to your model to improve it and then deploy that model. This is all possible from within the Azure OpenAI Studio. So let's go through a few examples.
Thanks, Maurice. So I will give you some examples, and we'll start with the playground. So what Maurice just shown here. So let's go first to, so people who already work with Azure, they already know, they already have a little bit some, they are used. So normally if you have Azure, you have a resource group. Then let's say that's called cognitive services. You create this service, is called the OpenAI. So from the Azure portal, you create a service. This service will be deployed, and you have access to the API service. When you have this, the service is here. I don't want to create another one, so I already have one. So it will take some time. When you have this service, let's see, it's called Isham OpenAI. Go to it and start exploring. So the best way to a little bit play with these services is to go to the portal and spin up a service and start with what we call the OpenAI Studio, and then you start doing some. So this is just to play around. For the developers, they will from the service they will get the API keys, and they will contact the API in order to do what they should do from within their laptop and their development environment. So here from the portal we explore. Then when you start exploring, you get something like that, portal. Then you have you have a number of examples, summarize an article, generate product name, and other examples. We are talking today about Codex, which is using generative AI for more creating code and all this kind of stuff. So we go to the GPT-3 playground, and then you have this place. In this place, you have this deployment. Here, you can create what already Maurice told about is in OpenAI has a lot of models, and models have different purposes. So if you want to use a model, one of them, you have to deploy one. And this deployment, I have already deployed a number of them, but you can create yourself one. And in the website of OpenAI or Azure OpenAI, you will also find what is the difference between the different models and also the price of every model. So you create one new deployment, for example, and you select here the model that you want to use. So you see there are a number of models. The ones that start with the code, they are trained to generate code. The ones that start with text, they are also trained to create text. And the last ones, within the text, you have the models that are trained to complete and to create text, and there are also models that are created to do what we call embedding. And embedding is just convert text to numeric vectors. So these deep learning models work only with numbers, so you should convert text to numbers, and they have some models that can do that. And you need it if you have some examples or some use cases in your company. You always, in order to do something with your data, you need to embed it in numeric vectors. So this is why there are also here these models in order to embed your text into vectors, into numerics, and from there you can do some cool stuff with it. So I have already a number of models here. So you see that I have already here this code DaVinci. I will go back to my GPT-3 and I choose my code, this model. I tell to OpenAI I want to use this model, code DaVinci 00.2, one of the robust models between all of them. And here you have some kind of parameters. There is a lot of things that you can choose later on the Q&A. If you have some questions about these parameters, I can tell you about them. But you can start here just playing a little bit around. I have already prepared something like create. So I give just a kind of prompt. Prompt is a request to OpenAI. I told them, okay, create a Python dictionary of 6 countries and their capitals. So it's complete the code. It's one of the use that you can do that. And if you want to see how it works from your Python or from your IDE, you can see here, and you can just copy paste in your environment. Another example is explain code using OpenAI Codex, which is now this code DaVinci 00.2. You generate, and then this is what this code do. So from here on, it's remove the common prefix from all the completion. For example, if the prefix is Python, blah, 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 blah. So it gives you a little bit what the code do. Another application of the Codex generative model, you can also convert from one language to another one. It's really very easy in the sense that you just give the code and you see, okay, this is JavaScript and I want it in Python. It generates something like that. Yeah, so it's also, if you want to, let's say, okay, from Python to C++, sorry, I forgot this 2 points here. So it's give you in C++, in Java, and in JavaScript. So another example of another application is, so just to give them a request or a prompt saying, please write code using OpenAI Codex, and I want a program that downloads all Twitter followers list in CSV file. And then so you see here that there is something here like you keep generating the code until you said, okay, there is no text was generated. That means that your code is finished. So this is a little bit the advice that we give. So you start always with, if you have an idea, you start with the playground and you start a little bit playing around. And then if your idea works, you go to your dev environment and you start developing. 5 minutes. So the other thing is that you can, what I think that I already people heard, told you about the GitHub Copilot. I hope that developers are already using that. So the GitHub Copilot is a service that is offered by GitHub itself together, and GitHub is a part of Microsoft. So you can go to GitHub, you Google just GitHub Copilot, and you can subscribe and you can start using it. There is a subscription on individual basis, and there is also business subscription that can guarantee some kind of SLA. So for companies, they are using the business subscription, and for individuals, I'm myself using just the individual one. The individual one sometimes, sometimes there is some delay on calling the API in order to complete your code. So let's see how it works. So this is maybe your dev environment based on VS Code. You have to add an extension. It's called GitHub Copilot. I think. it's this one. So I think it's 4 million installation, and if it's installed as an extension, you will also see it here somewhere. Here, you see it, and you can also deactivate it if you want. If we go back, I will go very quickly. So I have some examples. So you just start with writing a function. Let me reload the window. Yeah, so you see there is already some suggestion here. If you want to see if there are other suggestions, you can hover over the function there, and then you see that there are 3 suggestions. If you want to change them, change one of them. If you accept one, you just accept it. And then there is the function that you need for calculating the day between 2 dates. If you want to see what's the Copilot can in one shot, so you can just Control Enter, and then you see all the suggestion on the right side. It takes some time. Yeah, normally it gives you up to 10 suggestions. Yeah. But anyway, you can accept one of them. The last one is, I will give you the words, I'm sorry. So the last one is this one. So you find all images without alternate text. So you give just in your comments, you give the request to the Copilot, and you say, okay, Control Enter. Or yeah, waiting for all the suggestion he already give you here and suggestion, and he gives also that there are 2 suggestions. If you accept one, you just accept, and you have the function that find all images without alternate text. Yeah, this is a little bit how to use it, and I think it's very cool and will help you guys to be more productive. Yeah.
Switch that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall I switch?
Thank you for the presentation, the deep dive. Regarding time, I think we limit the Q&A to 1 question, and then we have borrow the networking drinks afterwards to ask a bit more questions. So are there any questions?
Thanks for the talk. The ChatGPT model, is that already available in West Europe? Because I think
the GPT-3 is, yes.
But the ChatGPT, like the
not yet.
5 Turbo,
not ChatGPT, yeah.
Yeah. So if you so here it's not yet here, so it's not available. Yeah. But
we normally are 1 version behind what OpenAI releases. So because we embed it into Azure subscription with some additional security restrictions and everything, which takes some time. So normally when GPT-4 is released, we are at GPT 3.5. And
yeah, it's not yet. It's on the US, in the US region, and I think it will come soon to Western region.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you to the 2 of you. And as I said, more questions, welcome the drinks.
Shall I take it?
Yeah. Perfect. So our last talk will, as you see, a bit easier, will be inspiring. So I don't know whether you heard about this example of Nike and Tiffany launching a joint design of a shoe, which caused some disappointed customers because they thought the shoe design you see was not really what they expected. And they started to generate their own pictures of how the shoe design could have looked like. And Rogier will now address exactly that case, presenting a tool, an AI assistant, which can create loads of, you're a bit outside, loads of different product designs and also marketing materials. So I'm curious to hear more. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining. And for those who are still here, I saw some people already leave. It's late of the day, drinks are after, so I'll keep it short and concise. Resleeve, AI product generation. I will present the following. So first of all, I'll explain a bit about the types of generative AI there are, then how Resleeve originated, and what we currently are doing. So, we just had a talk from Microsoft, and they focused on the large language model, which is called GPT. There are several. You have Lambda, you have Sparrow, and they are focused on text. Within Resleeve, we do something different. We work with imagery, and more specifically, we use diffusion networks. I guess some of you might have heard of Midjourney and DALL-E, and we are working with the same technology as they are. So, a bit of a background about how diffusion networks actually work. Within the vector space, which can be seen as an infinite space, there is text which is converted into that dimension. Now, what do I mean by that? Diffusion networks are trained on enormous data sets, and within this data set you'll have an image which is annotated. For example, you have an image of a king and it's annotated with a king, queen, man, woman, etc. So when we use a prompt, which is a text input, what basically happens is it will navigate through this vector space, pick up the points that you've written down as a prompt, and it will turn you an image. How will it do so? Well, diffusion networks work with noise. So it starts out with an entirely noisy image. And then as you write your prompt and you press enter, it will start searching through the vector space for the words you've put into your prompt. And within each step, the denoising process starts. So as it gets closer to the end results and it has taken all of the concepts from your prompt, it will start to come up with an image, a comprehensible image, as you see right here. So, back to Resleeve. Back in 2019, when I was crawling through the depths of the internet, I found something which was called generative adversarial networks, which are now known as deepfakes. You might have heard of them. No? Yeah. Well, they came in many sorts and forms, I can tell you. So we started with virtual try-on initially. So what do I mean by that? You would have an image of a clothing piece and you would have an image of yourself. So with Resleeve, you could then select t-shirt, jeans, shoes, whatever, and dress yourself to your liking. And we were very close to releasing our products. So by August last year, Stability AI released something they called Stable Diffusion. And we were curious, how could we use this to optimize our results? Because we were this close. So when we integrated it within our networks, we started seeing very interesting results because the clothing that we projected onto people were different. However, they were crystal clear. So we decided to iterate on this because it seemed like we had stumbled on something quite revolutionary, one could say. So after we got some results, we talked with our customers, we talked with our investors, asking, what do you guys think? And they said, well, this is awesome. So like any sensible startup would do, we decided to pivot. So what did we pivot into. A creative studio that can make infinite product designs and also market them immediately as well. If you look at the process from product development, it always starts with an idea. So you design a product, and the next step will be that you send it towards production, and the final step is that you market it to your customers. So currently, for the first and the final stage within the product development process, we have built a product with features that can provide within these steps. So what do I mean? We can now make infinite new product designs. So based on a prompt you give us, we'll give you a product which is exactly as to your liking. So here we used, for example, a particular dress with a particular style or color, and it gives us back the results you see here. Another feature that we can do with product generation is that we can train on the products that you already have. So for this example, we used bags from Gucci. So we gave the model 50 images of Gucci bags, we let it train on it, and then it can come up with new products which are exactly in the heritage of your brand, in this case Gucci. So there are two images here which I personally find very interesting. The first one being the camera. I know it's kind of creepy, of course, but a bit Big Brother-like, but who cares? And the second one is the one in the middle over there. So a bag with an LED strip. Like these two images in particular made me wonder, what is creativity? Because, well, I'm not the most creative person, but I couldn't come up with this, and I've never seen it either. Another product feature our product has is that we can make variations. So here we gave it one image of this dress, and then we can let it generate infinite new variations of it, which are in the same style, basically. We can even project it on a person and also provide details on how this person should look like. We can also change the color as a dress, as you see here. And another feature that we can do is that we can convert any sketch to a product. Oftentimes, the designs are still made roughly with a sketch, and the process of going from a sketch to an actual 3D render or photorealistic result can take hours, if not days. We do it in seconds. And finally, within the product generation products, we have something which we call mood boards to product. So often within design, things start out with a mood board, and from there on you just start iterating. However, that's not really necessary anymore, because you can just give us your mood boards, say what you want to have, and we'll provide. Then, if you remember, the total product development phases at the end was the marketing, and we already can do the following. Is if you have one image of a dress, we can train on it, and from that point on we can make all the marketing and promotional materials you need to actually start selling your product. So there are some slight variations here, and we actually thought this feature would only be here about 6 months from now, but we all know the field of AI moves fast, so it already is here today. Well, almost is. So how will Resleeve impact the product design? As a creative, you'll sometimes, more often than not, probably run in some kind of a block, a creative block. That is a concept that Resleeve has never heard of. If you give us any request or prompt and you press generate, we'll always give you something new, something different, but most of all, something unique. So for you as a creative, or a company for that matter, it will lead to increased productivity, as it will accelerate your design process. And since it can do so at superhuman speeds, you are likely to outperform your competition as well. Because like I mentioned, where a designer would take hours to days to make a design, we do it in seconds. So I guess no human can compete with that superhuman speed. So therefore you have a significant cost reduction, especially also looking at the marketing, because organizing a photo shoot to get all the marketing materials you need to actually start selling your product can be quite costly and timely, which also brings us to the last point. It will probably shorten your time to market significantly. Like I said, short and concise. Questions?
Terry, here in the front. Oh,
Yeah, I have a quick question. I think, if I'm thinking this, you are mainly generating something which is like to my opinion, is visually pleasing. Do you consider also in the manufacturing also like whether the design can be produced? I mean, it could be like looking really nice, but sometimes to be visible to be produced, then the design should be like also technically correct. So
Yeah,
to say.
that's a good question. You mean like to provide the files that are needed for actual physical production, right?
Yeah, I will say like if, for instance, I give you like as for example, like if I request something in the architecture, it could be like generating something like visually pleasing. But if is it can also be like built with a certain like endurance or what is it? Structurally safe, for instance. Yeah.
So taking things into account like thermodynamics, etc.
For instance, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is something that is within our scope, but we don't know how far out we are exactly. Because that is significantly a step up in terms of complexity. But yeah, we're definitely looking out for that as well.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good luck. Interesting.
And then Terry.
Gucci probably
Can you
isn't-
just put it in front of your...
I think everybody can hear me, don't you? Gucci probably isn't going to be all that thrilled that you're giving customers, potentially infinite variations on their designs, right? I mean, aren't you looking at copyright issues?
That's a very interesting remark. And we've spoken with lawyers for exactly that reason. And the thing is, legal has to catch up with reality, basically. So, but then again, if I use...
You're going to get a big fat bill, right? I mean, the inevitable, if the creators and these big design houses have, I'm thinking, pretty substantial legal staffs, then you can run, but you can't hide.
Yeah, fair point. But let me ask you this. What if I use Photoshop and take their image and start adjusting it a bit?
Okay, fair point. I get it. I mean, you can, I guess, when you take the original object and you modify it, it's no longer the original object, right?
I'm no lawyer, but I guess so.
Okay, I saw one question, and then I would say the rest we can... was there? Okay, otherwise you can take it.
Yeah, so
one question then.
Yeah.
The last one. So 2019, you start playing with adversarial models and probably not fully imagining what can bring, and now all these amazing images. So you must have had like a lot of learning of seeing, the prototyping stages with different things that work out and don't, as Resleeve was on its journey. So did anything, I don't want to say worried you, but did you see any troubling things about stuff that was generated or that made working with this technology difficult? Just anything that would trigger your intuition to be like, oh, we need to watch out for that one in the future. So
I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Like, look out for what?
Anything that concerns you about how this generative design is going to disrupt the market, maybe in a not positive sense. So things to watch out for, things to beware.
I think the coming of each technology always will have its downsides. It's just a matter that the upsides need to weigh bigger. And it's all about who yields the weapon, right? That's my opinion, at least.
Resleeve, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rogier. So you will be at the Borrel. You're located in the AI Innovation Center, so whenever there are questions.
So I'll be at the bar. If there are people maybe looking to innovate or streamline their products design process, or investors looking to increase their ROI on their portfolio, please come find me.
Thank you. So I won't take you too long from the drinks. Outside there will be also 2 demos, also from AI residents, showing more inspirational examples how to use generative AI. And we will have more events in the future, a meetup just to get to network with the AI community here. You can register here via the QR and also stay tuned for future events. So thank you and see you soon.